Chapter 8, The National Council. Article 68, Establishment, page 37. Article 69, Composition, page 37. Article 70, Term of Office of Members, page 38. Article 71, Oath or Affirmation, page 38. Article 72, Qualifications of Members, page 38. Article 73, Chairperson and Vice Chairperson, page 38. Article 73A, Secretary and Other Officers, page 38. Open bracket. Article 73A is inserted by the Namibian Constitution 3rd Amendment Act 8 of 2014. Article 74, Powers and Functions, page 39. Article 75, Review of Legislation, page 39. Article 76, Quorum, page 41. Article 77, Voting, page 41. Chapter 9, The Administration of Justice. Article 78, The Judiciary, page 41. Article 79, The Supreme Court, page 42. Open bracket, open quote, court, close quote, is capitalized in the heading which appears in the text of the Constitution, close bracket. Article 80, the High Court, page 43. Article 81, binding nature of decisions of the Supreme Court, page 43. Article 82, appointment of judges, page 43. Article 83, lower courts, page 43. Article 84, removal of judges from office, page 44. Article 85, the Judicial Service Commission, page 45. Article 86, the Attorney General, page 45. Article 87, powers and functions of the Attorney General, page 45. Article 88, the Prosecutor General, page 45. Article 88A, removal of Prosecutor General from office, page 46. Open bracket. Article 88A is inserted by the Namibian Constitution 3rd Amendment Act of 2014. Chapter 10, The Ombudsman. Article 89, Establishment and Independence, page 47. Article 90, Appointment and Term of Office, page 47. Article 91, Functions, page 47. Article 92, Powers of Investigation, page 48. Article 93, Meaning of, quote, official, close quote, page 49. Article 94, Removal from office, page 49. Chapter 10A, Anti-Corruption Measures. Article 94A, Anti-Corruption Measures, page 49. Open bracket. Chapter 10A, comprising Article 94A, is inserted by the Namibian Constitution 2nd Amendment Act 7 of 2010. Chapter 10B, Electoral Commission of Namibia. Article 94B, Electoral Commission of Namibia, page 50. Open quote. Chapter 10B, comprising Article 94B, is inserted by the Namibian Constitution 3rd Amendment Act 8 of 2014. Chapter 11, Principles of State Policy. Article 95, Promotion of the Welfare of the People, page 51. Article 96, Foreign Relations, page 52. Article 97, Asylum, page 52. Article 98, Principles of Economic Order, page 52. Article 99, Foreign Investments, page 53. Article 100, Sovereign Ownership of Natural Resources, page 53. Article 101, Application of the principles contained in this chapter, page 53. Chapter 12. Regional and Local Government. Open bracket. The word, quote, government, close quote, is misspelt in the Government Gazette as reproduced above, close bracket. Article 102. Structures of Regional and Local Government, page 53. Article 103. Establishment of Regional Councils, page 54. Article 104. Boundaries, Delimitation, and Demarcation Commission, page 54. Open bracket. The heading of Article 104 is substituted by the Namibian Constitution 3rd Amendment Act 8 of 2014. Article 105. Composition of Regional Councils, page 54. Article 106. Regional Councils Elections, page 54. Article 107. Remuneration and allowances and other benefits of members of regional councils, page 55. Open quote. The heading of Article 107 is amended by the Namibian Constitution 2nd Amendment Act 7 of 2010, close bracket. Article 108. Powers of Regional Councils, page 55. Article 109. Management Committees, page 55. Article 110. Administration and Functioning of Regional Councils, page 56. Article 110A. Regional Governors, page 56. Open bracket. Article 110A is inserted by the Namibian Constitution 3rd Amendment Act 8 of 2014. Article 111. Local Authorities, page 57. Chapter 13. The Public Service Commission. Article 112. Establishment, page 57. Article 113. Functions, page 58. Chapter 14. The Security Commission. Article 114. Establishment and Functions, page 58.